They said the war was over when the guns went quiet in 1945. But beneath the waves of the Atlantic Ocean, history was still being written. It's easy to assume that World War II has been fully catalogued. Every tragedy documented and each missing vessel accounted for, but sometimes reality hides far deeper than historians dare to look. In the cold darkness, nearly 230 feet below the surface, off the coast of New Jersey, lay the wreckage of a submarine that officially never existed at that location. A vessel that history confidently declared sunk near Gibraltar. Thousands of miles away, end of story. But the ocean, it turns out, keeps its secrets longer and stranger than we ever imagined. When a team of divers stumbled onto the sunken metal carcass in the summer of 1991, they had no idea their discovery would soon shake decades of military records to their foundations. In official reports, U-869, a fearsome Nazi submarine armed to silently ravage Allied shipping, vanished neatly near the Strait of Gibraltar. The US Navy had stamped the file closed, and historians followed obediently. No questions asked. But the wreck sitting quietly off the Jersey shore told a different story. A twisted heap of corroded steel and silent compartments filled with artifacts that had no business being their artifacts, waiting quietly in darkness to rewrite history. Yet, what those divers initially found wasn't gold, secret Nazi treasure, or even high-level intelligence. It was something far more ordinary and infinitely more chilling. But to understand why, we must first go deeper, back to a war that thought it had neatly tied up all its loose ends. How could a submarine vanish from history, only to reappear exactly where nobody was looking? The answer isn't just shocking, it's disturbing. To truly grasp the magnitude of this discovery, you first need to understand what U-869 was supposed to be and what it definitely was not. Built in 1943, U-869 belonged to the notorious Type IXC-40 class of German U-boats, an elite underwater predator designed for long-range patrols deep behind enemy lines. Measuring nearly 250 feet in length and equipped with 6 torpedo tubes, these machines were crafted to be invisible assassins beneath the waves. Their mission was simple: hunt, strike, vanish. Historical records are quite clear to clear. Perhaps, according to official Allied documents from February 1945, U-869 was reported sunk near the Strait of Gibraltar. The American Coast Guard proudly took credit, and historians promptly moved on. There were no sonar confirmations, no visual wreckage, and certainly no photographic proof, just a neatly typed report in a wartime file. Everyone assumed the mystery solved, or rather, conveniently filed away as solved. But then, decades later, when two seasoned divers, John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, stumbled across a wreck off the coast of Point Pleasant, New Jersey, something didn't add up. The location was nowhere near Gibraltar, and according to all known records, no Nazi submarine had sunk in that area ever. At first, the wreck was nothing more than an eerie curiosity, a rusting ghost, nearly impossible to identify. Poor visibility, hazardous conditions, and tangled fishing nets made it feel like an underwater nightmare. But something compelled them to return over and over. driven by the suspicion that history had made a grievous error or perhaps concealed something deliberately. What they eventually uncovered wasn't just surprising. It was unsettling in ways they couldn't yet fully understand. Slowly, painfully, each dive began to reveal its secrets. Gauges with German inscriptions emerged from the gloom, along with metric dials and machinery uniquely tied to Nazi engineering. The wreck was clearly German, but there were no visible identification markers, no hull number, no nameplate. This wasn't just another shipwreck. It felt like something deliberately scrubbed from existence. Their breakthrough came not from advanced sonar or military records, but from a simple, personal item, something ordinary, yet profoundly human, a rusted butter knife engraved with a crew member's name. But before we unravel whose name was etched into that forgotten piece of metal and why it mattered so much, we must first address a far darker question. If this submarine wasn't supposed to be here, why was history so determined to bury it elsewhere? That answer leads not only to the truth about U-869, but reveals unsettling questions about how history itself gets written and rewritten. Imagine holding history in your hand, not a treaty, not a famous general's signature, but something as mundane as a butter knife. Yet this simple utensil, discovered buried in the silt of a sunken submarine, would become the key to unraveling a decades-old deception. When John Chatterton and Richie Kohler surfaced from their dives, they were skeptical about their find. Yes, they had identified a German submarine, but its identity remained elusive. Without any clear hull markings, official confirmation seemed impossible. But then, amidst the wreckage of twisted metal and preserved compartments, they discovered a small personal belonging, just an ordinary butter knife etched with the name Horenberg. To most, the name meant nothing, but to Chatterton and Kohler, it was the clue they desperately needed. With painstaking research, cross-referencing naval archives, and shipyard records from Deschemag, the company that constructed the submarine, they finally connected the name to a real crew member, Georg Horenberg, a young German sailor known to have served aboard U-869. Yet the confirmation only intensified the mystery. If the knife belonged to Horenberg, then this submarine couldn't have been sunk near Gibraltar, as official records insisted. It meant U-869 had ended its mission off the American coast, a fact never recorded, never acknowledged, and deliberately left out of history. But the discovery didn't end there. Digging deeper into the German naval archives, Chatterton and Kohler stumbled upon an even stranger fact. There had been a crew member assigned to U-869 named Herbert Gaszewski. Unlike Horenberg, Gaszewski had never boarded this sub, for its fatal voyage illness had saved him. Decades later, living quietly in Germany, Gaszewski had always believed the official narrative that his fellow sailors perished somewhere near Gibraltar. When the divers finally located Gaszewski, presenting him with photographs of engine parts, German-labeled gauges, and the infamous butter knife, his reaction was disbelief, then quiet acceptance. He confirmed the name. Georg Horenberg had indeed been aboard. Gaszewski's memory was more reliable than the official archives. His presence the final proof needed. Still, Gaszewski refused publicity, lending only private insights. He didn't seek attention. His purpose was simpler: identifying lost comrades who history had chosen to forget. This silent witness bridged the gap between past and present. But there remained one chilling question. Even he couldn't answer why had history misplaced this submarine so drastically. The butter knife solved the what, but it opened a door to a deeper, darker why that demanded attention. How could military records be so wrong, or perhaps intentionally deceptive, about something as significant as a lost Nazi U-boat off American shores? The answers would soon point to something far more troubling, something hidden inside the submarine itself. But first, we must confront the darkness that still lies behind sealed, corroded doors. Stepping into the submarine's interior wasn't like entering a piece of forgotten machinery. It was like intruding on someone's final moments. For decades, the Atlantic had preserved the vessel in a way that defied expectations. This wasn't just a rusted wreck. It was an eerie snapshot of life abruptly interrupted. The first thing that struck the divers was how disturbingly intact everything was. Personal belongings, bedrolls still laid out on cramped bunks. A deck of cards sealed neatly in plastic. Even a harmonica resting patiently in a locker all spoke of young sailors waiting for their next orders. The crew quarters were small, suffocating spaces where men scarcely older than teenagers had passed their time between battles. Nearby, a single ration tin sat opened, as if someone had stepped out for only a moment, but that moment had stretched into eternity. But the preservation of daily life wasn't merely haunting. It raised practical questions about the submarine's fate. If UH-69 had been caught in an intense battle, shouldn't there be signs of panic, chaos, or struggle? Instead, compartments appeared orderly, even casual, suggesting a catastrophe so sudden. The sailors barely had time to react. The control room, however, told a different story. Twisted metal and shattered gauges revealed an internal force that violently ripped through the vessel. The submarine wasn't just damaged, it appeared to have imploded from the inside. Compartments buckled inward, crushed as though stepped on by something immense. This wasn't typical damage from enemy depth charges. It hinted at a horror scenario every submariner dreaded: being attacked by their own torpedo, a torpedo malfunction. Known grimly as a circle runner, could have explained the internal devastation. But there's a detail that challenges even that horrifying theory. Several torpedo tubes remained sealed, unfired. A submarine under attack would logically fire its torpedoes, desperately fighting back. The sealed tubes suggested either a catastrophic accident or something else. Something darker and more inexplicable had occurred. Yet, amidst these clues lay another small, deeply personal artifact: a cracked shaving mirror. The mirror likely reflected the face of a young man that very morning, perhaps the last time he saw himself alive. It's a chilling visual metaphor, a reminder that wars aren't fought by abstract forces, but by individuals caught in situations they scarcely understand. But here's the disturbing part no one had expected. Despite clear signs of internal explosion and sealed torpedo tubes, military historians and official documents continued insisting on a different narrative. A narrative stubbornly defended to this day. Could there be something even more sinister at play, deliberately obscured by history? To understand why, we must examine the conflicting accounts and dive deeper into the mysterious circumstances that brought down U-869, because one thing was becoming increasingly clear. This wasn't just an accident of war. The official story, told by the U.S. Navy, is simple and direct. Two destroyers, the USS Howard D. Crow and the USS Coiner, engaged a German submarine off the coast of New Jersey on February 11, 1945, dropping depth charges until their target sank. The Navy closed the case, confidently identifying the submarine as U-869. But the wreckage tells a different tale entirely, and here's where things get unsettling. For years, this version remained undisputed, a neat military victory on paper. But John Chatterton and Richie Kohler discovered that the wreck's precise location didn't match the Navy's coordinates. Close, but not close enough to dismiss doubt. The discrepancy alone might be overlooked, but the wreck's peculiar condition was harder to ignore. Rather than external damage typical of depth charges, the submarine's hull was pushed inward, indicating a violent internal explosion, a clear contradiction to the official combat theory. Now consider the torpedo tubes, several of which remained sealed and unfired. In a direct battle scenario, the crew would logically launch their torpedoes as quickly as possible, fighting desperately for survival. The sealed tubes suggest a far grimmer possibility. The submarine was destroyed by its own weapon, a catastrophic malfunction known as a circle runner. This nightmare scenario occurred when a fired torpedo's guidance system failed, causing it to loop back and hit the very vessel that launched it. However, this circle runner theory, compelling as it is, doesn't entirely explain why the US Navy would officially claim credit for sinking U-869. If the damage clearly contradicted their narrative, why hold onto a flawed version for decades? Unless there was another layer to the story, something intentionally hidden. This brings us to another unsettling fact. By late 1944 and early 1945, Nazi Germany was collapsing under immense internal confusion. Communications were erratic, commands constantly revised, and records haphazardly maintained. It's entirely plausible that U-869 received secret or altered orders never properly documented. Could the submarine have been on a covert mission, perhaps involving espionage, sabotage, or even transporting sensitive materials? Evidence supporting secret operations during the war isn't just speculation. Multiple Nazi submarines were known to undertake clandestine missions, some even approaching the American coastline. But if this were true for U-869, it would mean someone deliberately obscured these orders to keep allied forces, and perhaps even historians, from uncovering the truth. Yet, no definitive document supports this theory, only circumstantial evidence and uncomfortable silence from official channels. Still, consider this. Why would naval authorities, even decades after the war, resist altering their narrative in light of obvious contradictions? The chilling implication is clear. Either the Navy never wanted this submarine found, or someone powerful preferred the official lie to remain intact. But who and why? Before we tackle that disturbing possibility, we must first confront another painful reality. Despite the divers' discoveries and compelling evidence, Why did the authorities refuse to acknowledge the truth? That answer might be the most troubling revelation yet. You'd think a discovery this significant would be welcomed, even celebrated. Yet, the moment Chatterton and Kohler presented their evidence to naval authorities, they encountered resistance and silence. Military historians and naval officials insisted without definitive proof that the official record was correct. But why cling to an outdated narrative when clear evidence pointed elsewhere? The initial reluctance might seem merely bureaucratic agencies rarely admit mistakes. But there's more to it. Public acknowledgement of the U-869's true location wasn't just correcting a simple historical footnote. It threatened to unravel decades of trusted military narratives, casting doubt on other wartime reports and victories. The Navy's refusal wasn't just about one submarine. It was about the potential fallout from admitting they got something so important, so fundamentally wrong. The emotional cost of such an admission would have been immense, especially for the families of the 56 lost sailors. For half a century, these relatives had accepted the official story. Their loved ones' bodies had never been recovered. But at least there was the illusion of certainty. They believed they knew where their sons had perished. Now, they faced the unsettling reality that their family members died anonymously off the coast of a nation they were taught to fear. Even in Germany, authorities hesitated to embrace the divers' revelations. The German government focused on moving forward, rather than revisiting painful wartime histories, showed little enthusiasm to reopen old wounds. Official records from both sides became walls, not bridges, stubbornly refusing to reflect reality, preferring neat historical boundaries over messy truths. But there's another reason, deeper and more disturbing, that explains the silence. During wartime, intelligence and propaganda often intertwined. Victories were exaggerated, defeats minimized, and narratives tailored to maintain public morale. Admitting that one submarine's fate had been grossly misrepresented opened doors to questioning other official accounts, potentially uncovering other inaccuracies or deliberate deceptions. This wasn't just historical correction. It risked exposing how easily history itself could be manipulated. And here's where things become even more complicated. While some historians now cautiously acknowledge the U-869 evidence, official naval records have not changed, maintaining their original stance. It's a silence filled with implications. Were there additional secrets aboard U-869 that governments prefer forgotten? Were the submarine's sealed compartments hiding more than just personal belongings? The answer to that question remains tantalizingly out of reach, buried beneath bureaucratic inertia and layers of historical discomfort. But it's precisely because the authorities refused to budge despite overwhelming evidence that we must now consider a chilling possibility. U-869 was never meant to be discovered. Its secrets deliberately submerged with the submarine itself. What might be hidden within that wreck, still sealed and waiting to be found, might explain why even today, powerful institutions prefer this submarine remains quietly at the bottom of the ocean. To understand why, we need to confront the unsettling truths these governments are still reluctant to admit. U-869 isn't just another shipwreck, it's a message. The submarine Lying undisturbed beneath hundreds of feet of water wasn't simply a forgotten victim of war, but a haunting reminder of history's fragility and the ease with which truth can be erased. Its very existence challenged the sanitized narratives authorities wanted you to believe. When Chatterton and Kohler brought this submarine's reality to the surface, they didn't just salvage metal or artifacts, they exposed the vulnerability of history itself, laid bare by something as ordinary as a butter knife. Yet, for all their revelations, the ocean seemed to hold back something deeper, as if the wreck itself still protected one final secret, a secret not meant for the public. Something authorities quietly preferred to leave underwater. The most sobering reality wasn't the hidden damage or even the government resistance. It was the realization that U-869 might not be unique. Beneath the vast ocean floor, countless vessels remain undiscovered, each potentially carrying evidence that could rewrite more chapters of history. The U-869 wreck opened a door to these submerged truths, raising the uncomfortable question: how many other official histories are similarly incomplete or outright wrong? Historical records aren't infallible. They're written by people, shaped by political needs, wartime propaganda, and later, institutional pride. A submarine misplaced by thousands of miles isn't a minor oversight. It's a fracture in historical accuracy that hints at deeper distortions. The uncomfortable implication is that what we've been taught about major conflicts might be riddled with other hidden errors or purposeful concealments, kept secret by those who benefit from an unchallenged narrative. And if the truth about U-869 was merely lost, how many other lost soldiers, submarines, or even entire units remain nameless, their fates never corrected? Because no one looked closely enough or because someone actively discouraged it. Today, the technology exists to explore deeper and reveal truths previously beyond reach. Advanced sonar mapping, deep diving techniques, and underwater robotics could uncover more of these lost pieces. But each discovery carries a risk, not just physical dangers faced by divers, but risks to governments, institutions, and narratives built on decades of presumed accuracy, which raises another uncomfortable reality. Uncovering such truths isn't always welcomed. Sometimes, silence is preferred precisely because the truth challenges deeply held beliefs or threatens established reputations. And that silence itself speaks volumes about how fragile our historical certainties truly are. Still, despite resistance, every artifact lifted from these forgotten vessels, like U-869, forces an acknowledgement history isn't static, but alive, waiting patiently beneath waves for someone brave enough to question it. But before we consider how many more secrets the ocean still holds, there is one critical question we must finally face. Why does it matter now, decades after the last shot was fired? To keep seeking these painful truths, the answer might surprise you, and it might also disturb you, because the truth about U-869 isn't just about the past. It's about who controls the stories we believe today. The wreck of U-869 might seem like just another historical curiosity, a relic from a distant war, a puzzle for naval historians and enthusiasts. Yet, Its significance reaches far beyond a mere footnote in World War II history. It reveals uncomfortable truths about who controls the stories we accept as fact, and why questioning these narratives remains critically important. Consider this. For decades, official records dictated a neat, believable narrative about U-869's sinking. Families accepted it, historians published it, and generations learned it in schools. It took only to divers with determination and technology to overturn this certainty completely. But their discovery raises an even more unsettling possibility. If similar inaccuracies permeate other parts of history, how many other forgotten tragedies remain hidden, obscured by convenient but flawed official accounts? Revisiting these uncomfortable truths isn't simply an academic exercise. It's a direct challenge to institutions that prefer historical narratives to remain unquestioned. Accurate history, especially about warfare, shapes public perception, policy decisions, and even future conflicts. Distortions aren't harmless oversights. They're strategic tools. Governments understand this power implicitly, carefully curating what narratives survive and what stays buried beneath the waves. Moreover, the personal dimension matters profoundly. The discovery of U-869 wasn't just about correcting an abstract historical error. It was about acknowledging the humanity lost within that steel hull. The submariners aboard weren't mere statistics. They were young men whose individual stories vanished alongside them. Recovering their truth offers dignity to those who died anonymously. Their sacrifices buried beneath bureaucratic indifference or institutional convenience. Yet, bringing such hidden histories into the light isn't easy or universally welcomed. Governments are slow to revise official histories, often preferring silence over admission of past mistakes. But technology and human curiosity now empower independent explorers to bypass traditional gatekeepers. Every shipwreck discovered, every new artifact retrieved, forces historians and ultimately society to confront their incomplete narratives. Today, more than ever, we live in an era of rapid information manipulation. Historical inaccuracies become dangerous precedents for misinformation, validating the idea that truth can be whatever those in power declare it to be. The submerged U-869 isn't just about World War II. It serves as a metaphor for our contemporary relationship with information, power, and trust. Unquestioned narratives don't just distort the past, they shape our collective ability to recognize manipulation in the present. But acknowledging this truth creates discomfort or realization that historical accuracy isn't guaranteed simply because official sources insist on it. Yet this discomfort is essential, precisely because it compels us to scrutinize official narratives critically, questioning who benefits from historical silence or convenient inaccuracies. The case of U-869 is more than historical curiosity. It's a reminder that truth, submerged and forgotten, remains powerful enough to challenge even the most entrenched narratives provided. Someone brave enough dives deep enough to bring it to the surface. But before we conclude this story, there's one final revelation still waiting beneath the waves, a revelation that might forever change how you view history itself. All along, we've been piecing together fragments, rusted metal, personal artifacts, contradictory records, But there remained one sealed compartment in U-869 that divers approached with both dread and anticipation. It was here, behind doors corroded shut by decades of ocean pressure, that the final truth waited patiently. And this truth was far more disturbing than anyone anticipated. The compartment wasn't merely a part of the vessel's internal structure. It was deliberately sealed, suggesting intent. For divers Chatterton and Kohler, breaking into this compartment wasn't simply technical, it was symbolic, cracking open history's silence when they finally accessed this hidden space. What they found was astonishingly well preserved. Amidst shattered gauges and twisted debris lay objects that offered haunting testimony. Carefully stacked documents in waterproof covers, signaling equipment not typical for routine patrols, and perhaps most disturbing coded papers that hinted at operations never recorded in official German archives. These documents, while fragile, hinted at communications inconsistent with the submarine's known mission near Gibraltar. They pointed toward an entirely different agenda, one potentially directed toward espionage or sabotage along the US East Coast. Yet, this revelation alone wasn't what shook historians and authorities most deeply. It was the implication that Allied intelligence, perhaps even during the war, had known more than officially acknowledged but chose to remain silent, preferring the neatness of public narrative over messy realities of covert warfare. But here's the problem: precise details from these papers are still classified or ambiguously interpreted. Authorities remain tight-lipped, and certain documents retrieved remain under restricted access. This begs a troubling question: why maintain secrecy decades after World War II ended? One plausible reason is that the documents from U-869 might contain information compromising to governments, even allied ones, espionage operations, secret diplomatic communications, or covert sabotage missions, if openly revealed, could alter historical perceptions significantly, potentially implicating even friendly nations in uncomfortable wartime realities. Yet, while the exact contents remain partially obscured, the implications are clear enough. The sealed compartment wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate attempt to preserve secrecy, possibly intended never to resurface. The silence surrounding its discovery hints strongly at institutional unease, not simply about this particular submarine, but about what else may lie hidden beneath oceans or archived within classified vaults worldwide. However, even now, more questions remain unanswered. Who exactly ordered this mission? And why was it scrubbed from official records? Did Allied forces know about U-869's true location sooner than acknowledged? Could acknowledging this submarine's real mission disrupt other carefully maintained wartime narratives even today? The answers may never fully surface, locked behind persistent bureaucratic silence and institutional caution. But one truth has become unavoidably clear: U-869's story is far from isolated. Countless other wrecks rest in similar secrecy, each possibly harboring revelations powerful enough to rewrite history completely. Yet, before you consider diving deeper into such mysteries, there's one final question you must confront. Knowing what you now do about U-869, what other historical truths have you taken for granted? Truths that might also be waiting silently, patiently, Beneath the waves, U-869 began as just another lost submarine, a faded footnote in history's dense archives. Yet its discovery off the coast of New Jersey shattered comfortable narratives. Challenging official truths we assumed unquestionable, it revealed how easily history can be concealed or distorted by governments, historians, or institutions reluctant to acknowledge their mistakes or darker realities. The divers who risked their lives didn't just uncover metal and artifacts. They resurrected forgotten lives and confronted the uncomfortable truth that history is rarely as neat or simple as we've been taught. If U-869 could vanish so completely from official records, what else lies hidden beneath our ocean's secrets that could rewrite entire chapters of our shared past? Now, it's your turn to ask, what other truths have been conveniently ignored or deliberately hidden? How many more lost stories are silently waiting beneath waves, sealed within classified files or buried behind official silence? History, after all, doesn't belong to those who write it, but to those willing to question it. The ocean, cold and indifferent, keeps all secrets equally, but it's up to us whether those secrets remain buried forever or are finally dragged into the light. What do you believe really happened to U-869, and what other stories deserve to be uncovered? The truth awaits your curiosity.